The lonely road hummed in the silent night air. The old rusted car rolled over a speed bump every so often. Silent tears could be heard by the dead earth as the radio was turned to its lowest volume. The woman narrowly escaped the clutches of the demon she wed. She didn't understand why she did it, going back only to leave in fear. Maybe it was because of her fear of the world. Maybe it was a need to be back with him in hopes that one day he might change his ways and love her like he used to. She felt foolish. Her journey came to an end once again as she drove up the oldly dusty broken driveway. She looked up with her tearful eyes. Beer, cigarettes and drugs were all on the porch along with him. "It's about time you came back, bitch. Now take me downtown. I need to restock." He gave his usually command to her as she followed, not being able to fight back anymore, in fear she would kill her unborn child. He entered the car in an exaggerated way, swinging the door and jumping him, letting out a groan, all the while the car squeaked in retaliation. "Hurry up! We ain't got all night," he said, as he hit her arm. She flinched, but hoped that maybe his earlier beating of her had tired him out. Carefully she backed out of the driveway, looking in the rear view with her swollen black eyes, and began in the long, lonely dark road that led to the city an hour away. In the woods everything could be heard, yet nothing could be seen. The woods blocked all light, except for the moonlight that lit up the roads, but only when it was overhead. She hated this drive. Up in the mountains, the roads were always dark and gloomy. No one else lived up here but them and the friends that would come over to spend time with her husband. She began to let her mind wander amongst the dark, barren woodland, and how they looked so bright and beautiful when they first moved here, but now, years later, they grown bitter and dull. Beginning to feel tired, she contemplated letting him take the wheel. She looked over at him and realized that he had fallen down the window and was smoking a joint. It would be dangerous to let him drive, she thought. I can do it. I can make it there and back. I have before, I will now. I'll be strong. For them. Looking at the small clock in her car, she realized she had 45 minutes to go. About 30 more minutes of dark woods before they reached the large, bright city. Tired of this, aren't you? She looked around, thinking she heard a voice. No one was in the back. He was high off his ass. The more she thought about where the voice came from, the more she realized it came from her own mind. Am I going crazy? Then it responded. Of course you aren't crazy. Who are you? Just something that could help you. Help me? How? Aren't you tired of him? He hurts you and your child. You're sick of it, aren't you? This thing, whatever it was, had made a point. She was sick of him. She wanted a safe place for a child to grow up. What do I have to do to gain your help? She asked, feeling as if she was making this wolf thing up. Kill him in the woods. Offer me a soul and body and I can guarantee your child's safety in birth. My child's safety in birth? She imagined it. Her child being born, growing up, being happy. Although she had her doubts, she couldn't pass up her chance. She pulled off on a road that was once used for a campsite, but laid vacant for many years. Slowly she stopped the car and turned it off. Exiting the car, she heard her husband. Huh? You dumb bitch! This isn't downtown! He yelled as he got out, ready to beat her. Luckily in the back seats lay the crowbar, which he grabbed. He went around the front and saw her close the door, but failed to see the weapon. Explain why that you can't take someone orders. He bared his teeth, looking like a deranged lunatic. I said He didn't get to finish his sentence, as a crowbar and came in contact with his face, knocking him to the ground. "That's enough," she said, quietly. She swung at him on the ground. Luckily his reactions were heavily slowed due to all the drugs and alcohol in his system. She kept swinging and swinging, letting out all of her rage she held on to for years. Finally his torment would be over, and she'd be free. Her child would live and be happy. As he swung, blood began to cover parts of her face and arms, her stomach and legs only getting trickles of it. The deed was done. She had killed her husband. His corpse was at her feet as she came back to reality and realized what she had done as she began to tear, and out came a silent scream. "What have I done?" she questioned to herself, feeling guilty. "You need to follow instructions," it said, the voice in her head. "But where are you?" she thought, barely able to contain her tears as she looked around. In the woods she saw something which she had not noticed and would not have noticed if its head was not completely white. She wiped her eyes and it seemed to come closer. It looked as if it hadn't moved at all. "You're the one who told me to kill him?" she asked, somewhat desperate in her words. "Yes," was the simple reply he gave. A moment passed. She began to compose herself. "Well, here's my husband's body and soul. In return, you would keep my baby safe?" She looked up at the faceless creature, beginning to hear static as it came walking towards its long, thin legs. "Of course. A deal is a deal after all." And that was the last thing she heard as it became dark. She woke up on her porch the next morning. She felt as if it was all a dream. She slowly got up, but laid back down as she began to feel a headache and what seemed to be new bruises on her body. After a few minutes, she got up, trying her best to ignore the pain. Every step she took felt as if she was walking barefoot on sharp glass. Making her way to the bedroom, she looked into the mirror that hung low. She lifted up her shirt, which she had just realized was lined with dirt, and saw strange black markings. The markings looked like veins that all seemed to be reaching out to the center of her stomach, leaving a small circled area where it looked like normal skin. She went to her phone and quickly dialed 911. Sometime after, then an ambulance came and took her to the hospital. Everything came out to be fine, and she was able to get back home thanks to a nice employee of the hospital. The next following weeks, doctors came to check on her, and eventually the police came to find her husband. He had some warrants against him. After searching the house, they didn't find him and he remained missing. The next few months rolled around, and the happy soon-to-be mother had cleaned the house off all the filth and found a job as waitress at a newly built dinner. As time passed, she came closer and closer to a due date. The strange markings she had never left her. Finally the day had come. She was at work in a back room on a lunch break when it happened. Luckily, one of the older women was a midwife and helped her deliver the baby. When the baby came out, only the wheels of the mother could be heard. Everyone else stayed quiet. Tired eyes looked up at the shocked people around her. What's wrong? Is the baby hurt? She was scared for a baby. She didn't want to lose it. Sweetie, the baby is just fine, but... She couldn't finish. But what? Let me have my child! She cried out in desperation. The baby, all wrapped up in a kitchen towel, was handed to her. Immediately she noticed the parent's white skin and blankless expression. The child's eyes were covered by its already growing black hair. The baby seemed to look up at his mother and reach out a hand. It was the first baby she's ever had. This was the first baby she's ever held. And this was the first time she actually became a mother. She promised herself in that moment that if no one else would love this baby, then she would. Looking up, she realized everyone had backed away, and one was on the phone with the police. "It's a monster! Its skin is white, and it's already had long hair, not to mention the things on its back." She looked down at a baby and turned it enough so she could see what it looked like tentacles on its back. She turned it back around and looked at him. The baby also looked and smiled at its parent. Knowing that the baby wouldn't fit in, she quickly put her pants back on and began to run out the door. She had sirens shortly after, and people wearing camo came out of the large black vans. They began chasing her as she ran. Dogs barked and it sounded like they were getting closer and closer. That didn't scare her. She didn't care if they caught her, killed her, tortured her, or did other things with her. All she wanted was her child to be safe, so she ran and ran and ran until eventually she no longer heard the dogs. The footsteps of the people could no longer be heard. Slowly down, she tried to catch her breath, her baby in her arms. The legs were weak, and she fell. She made sure she was on her side as she looked down to her baby. She smiled back at her mother, reaching out her hand once more. Her mother grabbed her hand. "I love you, Catheran. Always remember that, okay?" She tried to catch her breath, but all the running had caused her to have an heart attack. Her child being the last thing she saw, right before some black snake-looking thing came into view. Then she blacked out, eyes closing, never reopening. "It's a pity," a tall, dark figure said to himself. It looked at the baby, who began to cry. "I suppose something needs to be done with you." He grabbed the child with one of her trundles and carried her to a cabin located far from the original home. A lonely witch lived. He knocked on her door and left the child to cry in the dirt of the door. "What do we have here?" she asked, eyeing the baby. The old brittle woman bent down and grabbed the strange baby, her claw-like hands making the baby stop and stare. "Huh," she stared. "Catheran, that mother, big tall man? Well, you've had quite a life already, and it's barely a day old." She sighed, knowing what this meant. "Fine, I'll take you in, but you will have to work, and don't be troublesome." She brought the small infant inside, closing the door behind her. Years passed. The baby grew, never knowing her caring mother, never knowing the alcoholic father, never knowing him, the faceless man who caused all this. Her mother could only have hoped for the best, for all the love she was unable to give, to go to her. All she didn't know was where the forest would take the child after it had taken her.